So here we go. As an opener, we talk about COVID-19 as a disruptor, but it wasn't really a disruptor. It was an accelerator, right? So a lot of things that were already in place are already moving down the road. And this has been mentioned before, but a lot of them just went like off the cliff. The previous presentation I did. Wait, we had a sketch basically of a check mark, and that's pretty much what economies look like and everything else. But there was also things that we're going to talk about today that I think got accelerated, that is really big challenges for people in a position of our guests here today. So one of the first things I want to talk about was the physical manifestation of your brands, which is bank units. For you, Martha, and Steve, for you, physical stores, and man, you have a bunch of them. So let me ask you guys this question, and Steve, you can go first. But the e-com, so that was one of the things that really got accelerated into hyper speed. And I showed a presentation last time where Best Buy's e-com just in the second quarter was up 275% from the year before. Did that kind of thing happen to you, to both of you?
Yeah, absolutely, Lee. I mean, it's amazing, right? You pre-COVID, you start to, you're thinking about where you want to take your physical brick and mortar and advancements in digital and app development and for buy online and pick up in store. And as you said, like in an instant, suddenly it moves to the front of the class, and everyone's working on that piece of it, right? Like, you really don't have an option. You can't opt out. So regardless of whether it's expensive cost to fill, pick from store, pick from a warehouse, right? Like, because no one's really figured out how to make it super profitable. Everyone knows that they have to get into it, right? The consumer is demanding this, right? The consumer is really who's giving us what the trends are to move forward. But COVID, immediately, customers expected that obviously the interaction with those physical brick and mortar stores, they said, just can't do it. Like, we're mandated to actually not visit these locations. So therefore, how we acquire our goods and to some extent services has to change, and it has to change overnight. So what we saw, for example, was a ton of advancement in the digital technology piece of app development to be able to ready ourselves for that, as well as sort of the operational look to how do you now take a store that was built for a retail experiential and that now needs to act, even in the short term, as a bit of a fulfillment center to satisfy the needs of the new consumer.
Yeah, and I saw something where Target was doing, they reduced the cost of e-com by doing it out of their back rooms. And, that it's nice for them because it's a big box store and it has all this space available. So they were able to do it. But for you guys, not so much. And Martha, what about you? I mean, I've worked with a number of banks before, and you guys were already faced with this where the e-com was going off the charts. People started banking online. Like, I have 3 Gen Z kids who I think have never been in a bank. So you were already faced with this dilemma about your physical units, but did something also happen on the e-com side for you guys?
So I think, we're always looking for ways to push digital adoption, even inside the branch itself. And it was interesting to watch people respond in the beginning of all this. And we're always looking at the distinction between US and Canada as well, since our brand is strong in both countries. And actually, in Canada, we saw kind of a spike in people wanting to come to the branch. And I think that was because people were, not feeling very confident about the economy potentially and wanting to make sure that their money was in a trusted spot. And we had significant foot traffic actually coming to the Canadian network. Not so much the US. Things were a little bit different down here. I think we had, other channels like drive-through that kind of helped address some of that. But, over time, over the last 6 months, we have seen that transactions have kind of gotten back to normal and then, been further declining as people have become a little bit more comfortable with the situation and, not wanting to have to actually go to the physical branch to do their business.
Yeah. So keep going on the drive-through portion of that, if you would, Martha, because that was my next question, has to do with delivery, which also was one of those things that exploded for obvious reasons, especially during the first 3 months. But I just got a report out of China where a couple of the companies there experienced like 100% increase in delivery, of course, like during COVID. Then afterwards, it stayed. So those numbers persisted. But what happened to you like through the drive-through?
So I don't have any specific stats, unfortunately, but we were at an advantage in the U.S. footprint because we do have drive-through typically as part of any of the kind of branches, and we don't necessarily have that in Canada. So perhaps that's kind of the distinction between the two when we talk about foot traffic and what that looked like in the beginning. We are exploring things like curbside pickup of particular product cards and things like that. But we're dealing a lot with advice conversations and not necessarily physical things to distribute. So I think the branch itself will still be important and people will expect to have that kind of face-to-face interaction.
Yeah. So talk to me about curbside again at your units.
Yeah. So actually, I think it just kind of came about today, which is timely. We got a note about curbside debit card delivery, which is going to be something that's available to customers in every store by the end of October in the US, which basically means the customer can go online and order a replacement debit card, something that you can do for free at the branch typically, right on the spot. And now they can do it online. They can schedule a pickup time, check in with the virtual queuing, which is also something that's been really useful to us over the last couple of months. And then they come to the store and their card comes out and is delivered to them curbside, kind of like your takeout. Nice.
Write that down. And Steve, are you guys doing curbside?
We're not in a big fashion through some of the pilots that we're doing with other partners. So, we've got some pilots that are happening with Kroger, and you can do curbside grocery pickup. And we piloted in a couple of different markets. But quite frankly, the digital technology was, as I mentioned, was a place where there needed to be advancement. So very soon you will see, a chain of 9,000 plus stores figuring out how to deliver against that aspect to the consumer, right? They're demanding it. We are, one of the things we have been doing through COVID though, Lee, which you mentioned, drive-throughs, we've got quite a few of our stores that have drive-throughs. The majority do, quite frankly. And immediately through COVID, we started to put front-end retail essential products actually through the drive-through. So not only could you pick up your prescription, which it was reserved for before, and get that kind of advice, but you could also get essential products, right? Like you couldn't get a gallon of milk because obviously it's a drawer or a 24 pack of water. But talk about those essential items to keep your life going, both food as well as health and wellness products. We were delivering 65 and then 100 of those items through every drive-through as key items that you could add to your order.
Now, logistically, that must have been a challenge for you because I've worked with drugstores as well, and there's all kinds of rules about the pharmacy. So you had to actually bring normal goods through the pharmacy and then out the window, right? Yeah.
So we actually, to be honest with you, what we ended up doing, right, because of the regulations that you mentioned with Board of Pharmacy, you couldn't have the door opening and shutting and a runner going and getting items off the shelf. So we actually set up a mini fulfillment center right there within the pharmacy. So immediately the items could be gathered and put bagged, and the transaction could happen and get out through the drive-through. So that was one of the limiting factors, right? Like, what are those key items that customers are asking for that they need right now? And that's really where they kept iterating on the assortment.
TP, right?
Yeah. One roll at a time. One roll at a time.
Oh, joy. Another big factor, and you might have heard Jordan Burke just a little while ago talk about dark stores. And for you, Martha, dark dark units altogether. And both you guys are pretty well equipped, with drive-through positioning and things like that, which that happened on the QSR restaurant side, where all those guys who had drive-through didn't experience anywhere kind of the plunges that the rest of the restaurant industry had. So are you in conversations about completely dark units at all? And Martha, I'll ask you first.
Not necessarily. I think that we are definitely pushing all of the kind of transactional types of interactions, trying to push those to the ATM. We're looking at a lot of offsite ATM opportunities. But I think that the vision for the branch is really that it does kind of maintain itself as more of an advice center. So I don't, that's what the customers generally are looking for today, is to be able to come in and actually have a conversation with someone. So I think it's really going to have to be still a blend between the two, maybe more transactional sites, smaller, offsite, and then really taking that advice concept to the physical stores themselves.
Steve, what about you? Are you on it? You guys on it?
I would say
completely
that,
dark Walgreens.
I would say anything's up for grabs, right? The world has changed, and but there's also a reason why they're dark, right? So there's a multitude of reasons of why that's the case. But thinking about it in terms of micro fulfillment, like, why wouldn't you consider those kind of things? To date, what we've done is we've leveraged the site more than anything else for those dark locations to set up COVID testing sites. So that's where it's really become beneficial for the population. So literally having these drive-through testing sites, leveraging the real estate and the proximity to the population.
So we talked about this a little bit before, and for all I know, all the listeners were already listening, but I want to bring it up again because it's definitely a challenge. Both of your brands have mega units, really, like a lot of units out there. And so this type of thing happens, where, and again, you pointed out, it's easy for me to say because we're talking about dark stores, we're talking about delivery, you talk about buy online, pick up in store. When you already have existing units, like several existing units, it's not such an easy thing to get done. It's not even an easy thing to test or to do in 100 stores or 200 stores, let alone thousands. So could you talk a little bit about the philosophy of how you handle something like that, and pick any one of those, buy online, pick up in store, delivery, curbside, that type of thing. Like, how do you integrate that into a process that's never seen it before? Either one of you can start. Maybe Martha.
I think, it's really about choosing a few key test locations and scaling up from there, making sure that we're choosing locations in the right markets, maybe not always necessarily the busiest markets, but working really, really closely with the business to figure out what we can do to support operations through that new experience and making sure they have the right tools in place. I think there is a lot of iteration of tools throughout the last 6 months, and tweaking of the experience, and trying out things across multiple formats virtually before we actually went out and executed. That was really key as well.
So you would start out with 100 stores or something like that, a smaller test?
I think even a smaller test than that. Yeah, typically I think we start with more kind of like the 5 to 20 store range, maybe a few different markets, but start small and then scale up from there.
Steve, what about you?
I mean, it's
9,000.
It's always a challenge in these days, right? Like, so what's that balance between, call it flawless operations, and being able to innovate, right? And sometimes it's difficult to do both. We know that the innovation tends to fall to the bottom of the track. For us, what we've done is, keep the machine fed, like make sure that we're delivering on our promise of the brand to customers across those 9,000 units, while we have a small group of folks who's just thinking about the future or what those opportunities are. And that's where I think it becomes exciting, right? You tend to Martha's point, you tend to pilot those things, and then figure out a way to sort of integrate them into the train that's going a million miles an hour down the path, trying to keep people safe, keep units, operational, people with family, right? Like these people who serve as customers and patients have lives, right? They're dealing with all of the same things, but yet they're working for an essential business. So they're critical, making sure that they're safe and that you can rebalance that work out. And the other thing that I'll throw out there as well is in the middle of all of the COVID world, we had all of this civil unrest that hit as well. So from our perspective, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units that were damaged through looting and fires. And there's an ongoing effort to just try to do that. That's on top of a base operation. So, things like launching mobile pharmacy units out to communities to make sure that people are getting the necessary medications that they need just to stay healthy through this as well becomes a whole different track that the business has to think about. While, to your point, you're thinking about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we opened dark stores, or how fast can we get into the buy online and pick up in store? So it's unprecedented times when you think about the collision of all of those things that's happening within the world of, right, call it retail or pharmacy or banking. Every single industry is faced with this at this point.
Yeah, I was listening to Michelle Goss of Kohl's last week, and she was talking about, and I thought, well, this is true for every retailer, but there was 3 phases. The first phase was, oh my God, what happened? And, what do you do? Do I have to furlough people? Do I have to close stores? Or am I essential? Am I not essential? There was that first sort of shockwave. And the second one was, okay, so what do we have? And how do we make money with what we have? But then the third one was, what can we become? And so let me just ask you this, and Steve, you can be first on this one. Like, which one of those phases are you guys in now? And then, if you can project forward a little bit, like, give us a little bit of a taste of what that third one is going to be, or what you guys are thinking about for that third space right now.
Yeah. Well, it's not only us, but I think to your point, like, we have a lot of units. I mean, there's a lot of real estate. I mean, let's face it. We have a store, a physical brick and mortar store that's within 5 miles of 80% of the population of the U.S. So think about that.
Wow. Yeah.
A physical store that's within 5 miles of 80% of the population. So if you think about the likes of the Amazons, they would kill to have that kind of distribution, right? And that kind of network and have that kind of proximity to customers. So that really causes for us to think about what if, right? Like, how do you take these, fantastic corners of America and start to think about it not only as, I'll call it the conventional drugstore as we've known it to date, but how do we really start to come together to solve for people's lives? So, in our case, you'll see, an exploration where we've got, and we've made announcements out there with Village Medical. So, to go to hundreds and hundreds of stores. This was where you had a company where you've got a pharmacist who's critical to people's lives and their well-being, but also doctors. And the thought was, how could you leverage that proximity and that strength of maybe bringing together those two things together? I hate, the doctor and the pharmacist and all of the people that surround it, and the power of, like, helping people with health outcomes, or putting them together in the same box. So when the customer and the patient comes in, they're really feeling like everyone's there to really serve them. It's not, I go to the doctor gives me a paper script or sends it electronically. I drive to the Walgreens, choose between the drive-through and, right? But think about it, right? Like, so if I'm a newly diagnosed diabetic, where do I go? Where do I go to get that advice? I want my doctor and I want my pharmacist to work together to help solve for those kind of things. So, where can that go? Like, how do we think about, like, food as an essential medicine, right? And how do you start to bring together, maybe thinking about different partnerships and different ways to, short of having it be a dark box, really a place where people can get, things that are important in their lives solved for, right? So, that's just some of the different ways that we're starting to think about things.
So that's a really good point. I want to talk about that in a second. Because branding with somebody else, or having, like, co-joined brands, I think is going to be a big thing going forward. there's a little bit of a, circling the wagons type of thing too, because the behemoths are on the march. Let's just put it that way. I was reading where Walmart and Amazon's numbers are just off the chart. They're going to experience something like 35-40% increases to last year, which leaves the rest of us in a predicament. But first, like Martha, can you give us an idea, like which one of those boxes are you guys in now? The first one is I just got punched in the face. The second one is I get up and brush myself off. And the third one is, okay, now what do I do? Do I run or do I attack, or like, where do I go? Like, where are you guys at?
I think we're at the beginning of, where do we go from here? We're definitely, starting to kind of sit down together and kind of create a future vision. I think what we know is that it's going to be really important for us to be flexible and agile and, for the go forward, I think create environments that allow us to really move quick if something like this should happen again, and also kind of rethink and reset our vision for what the sort of advice experience looks like go forward. Prior to this, I think we're very focused on what this shoulder to shoulder kind of experience with the customer would look like. And that was really the focus. And now there's probably going to be a lot of hesitation about doing that. So how do you teach someone about the tools we have and educate them about the products in a way that can, still allow them to feel comfortable in that kind of environment? And I think also we have a lot of corporate space in addition to not 9,000 branches, but still, plus 2,500 is a good footprint. And we're looking at taking some of the dark space and potentially repurposing it for corporate use, allowing advisors to work remotely and, creating more corporate space, leveraging some of that retail that just may not make sense go forward.
So let me ask you this, because I just worked on a bank project last year, and we went back and forth on the Capital One idea, which is definitely in box 3. Like, we're going to make our bank units cafes, or every other one's going to have a cafe. What do you think of that idea? Like, just something completely different. And oh, by the way, sign over here, and let's refinance your mortgage.
Yeah, I think the customer is definitely looking for a little bit of something unique when they come to the branch now. So we're definitely interested in partnerships. I think we're interested in that at more of a local level. So we're really focused on hyper localization and working with the community to create pop-up experiences and that sort of thing. I don't know that we're necessarily in a place where we're saying we're going to completely change the experience to be something that is not banking. I don't think that that's where TD is. I think we're very interested though in this concept of creating more of a lab space where people can pop in and out, and we can have different partners to keep things fresh over time and kind of reset in a greater level of frequency.
So you hate it?
I don't hate it. It's very convenient. I love going to Capital One, grabbing my coffee when I'm down near Union Square. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be something different for TD.
Is it any good? Coffee?
Don't feed him, Martha. Don't feed him. He doesn't need anything to feed his.
Any coffee's good coffee for me.
Yeah, that's true. Certain times of day, it's like, oh my God. So let's talk about those partnerships a little bit more. Steve, you brought up a really good point. What you're doing with what is it, Medical Village, right? Village Medical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of that going on. Like Starbucks has been doing that with grocery stores for a long time, it just makes so much sense. So is there anything else that you could see going down the road? Like Martha, the coffee shop and banking is not that crazy of an idea. Is there anything else you guys see going down the road that's a possibility? Because obviously, from all this stuff that we're talking about, the consumer is thinking about multiple things at multiple times. Give it to me in 100 different ways. And so the ideas are no longer as far-fetched as they were even like 5 years ago. Anything else you guys see? Any other? And you don't have to be brand specific, but anything else you see partnering with? Anybody? Any type?
I'm thinking
I
we
mean, I
deliver
think,
debit
you know,
cards curbside now.
With coffee.
yeah, and we could have
There you
pop-up
go.
pharmacies in the bank. Why not? Yeah.
Okay, so no.
Well, I think,
So
I'll just throw it out there. Like, I think we would be remiss if we weren't really thinking about how the changing consumer is expecting things, right? Like, they want things, they need help solving things for lives. People are busy. And, they're busy trying to, take care of themselves, take care of their families. Like, there's a lot of demands on people. And I think that, leveraging whether it's bringing together partners with selected services or goods that can really solve for people's lives. Like, what if we could get to a place where these partnerships came together and, Lee, you were to get home and suddenly you got home 15 minutes earlier than you normally did. And you were like, wow, that was super easy, right? Like, I got all the stuff that I needed. I didn't have to go to 12 different places. I met with all those key brands that I have, and I got 15 minutes back on my watch to, have a single malt scotch or whatever you choose to do with that time. That's where I think we need to really be open-minded.
yeah, especially. So let me ask this. We're just being asked to wrap up here pretty quick, but how do you see it? And we also lost Martha, but
Martha's there.
oh, really? I can't see
I'm
her.
here.
But you're there? You're okay, Martha?
I'm here.
So how do you guys see the next couple of years playing out? Like, forget about COVID for a second. Let's say it to quote a famous man, miraculously goes away, in a couple of months. Like, how do you see this adventure playing out? Because like I said, we're already getting information from the post-COVID in China that all this stuff that came into play that we just talked about stays, and the consumer gets used to it, like single malt scotch, like we were talking about, and it really doesn't go away. So how do you guys see the next couple of years playing out? Martha, you want to grab it first?
Yeah, I think I think TD it's still going to be a bank. I don't think we're going to be something else necessarily. We'll still be the same company. I think we're going to be refining the network to be much more purpose built for these specific communities that we're in. So potentially there'll be a bit of thinning and kind of merging of physical assets, just where we have the opportunity and where that makes sense. And I think that we're going to stay the course in terms of building out the network as very much advice focused and addressing the customer's expectations, that they come in and have a conversation with someone in a comfortable environment. And I think we're going to continue to see this sort of transactional side of things decline because people will get more comfortable with using the digital products and tools that are available to them, do it a little bit more conveniently at home or off-site.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that, especially young people, right? Steve,
Yeah.
what about you? Next couple of years, where are we going to be?
I think the reinvention, started well before COVID. It had to, with what was happening in the world of e-com and digital independence. And I think that COVID and civil unrest has just has been an accelerant to that. And I think the next 2 years, we see a disproportionate amount of people who are focused on what that future is. All right. Like, so keep the wheels in the bus, but really overinvest in people and time and energy on the what could be's, like we've never seen it before.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's going to be the order of the day. And then the testing and execution part, which is what we were touching on before, like how is that going to go down in the most rapid fashion possible? Like the tech guys are expert at failing fast, and I think we're all going to have to get there like really quick. Okay, anything I missed? Any points you guys want to make about your brands or anything? Anything you want to discuss that we missed here?
Quite a few good topics. I'm excited to see where we all land at the end of this.
Yeah.
I got 1 minute, so I'm going to ask you guys a question. So the Carvana changed the car business because they would actually come to somebody's house and bring a car. If you didn't like it, they drove it home. You guys see anything like that for your brands? Like, would you send, I mean, you already send bankers in terms of loan agents and loan officers and stuff like that out, but could you see sending like banks actually going out, meeting the people on their grounds?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. I think that is the ultimate convenience factor for sure.
Yeah, now we're kind of hunkered down there. Steve, what about you?
Yeah.
We have pharmacists come to your house?
I mean, clearly it's, we both come from regulated businesses, right? Martha, in the banking industry, and for us with boards of pharmacy, which tend to be statewide. But I do think that the way that people get goods and services have to change and will change. So I think that opens huge opportunities, right? So, whether it's, just throwing it out there, drone delivery for pharmacy, other forms of goods and services, right? I think all of those rules will have to be broken. The consumer is going to demand it.
Yeah. There were a lot of things I think that we all thought would be impossible before this, and then we had no choice but to make them happen overnight, and somehow it happened. So nothing is impossible anymore.
So yeah, I think I agree with both of you. All right, Steve and Martha, thank you very much. And you guys, thanks for listening, and we will see you later, and hopefully we'll see you next year or even sooner in person. So everybody take care. Talk to you soon. Thanks for joining in.
Great. Thanks.
Take care, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.